Deemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Monday edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. I hope you had a good weekend. I want to talk to you about something that was just, I believe, laid on my heart over the weekend. I was somewhat hesitant to talk about it. I'm ashamed to admit that, but not because I thought it was, not because I'm embarrassed of the topic, or not because not because I didn't think the topic was important or necessary. There's just always so much news to cover nowadays. Sometimes I feel pressed to cover the news, and I do want to bring you the latest news of the day. I mean, that's something that I always like to do. That's something that I think you tune in here at the Carl Jackson Show podcast at SalemPodcastNetwork.com, theCarlJacksonShow.com to do. But sometimes there are just bigger pressing issues. I had the opportunity to my wife and I to sit with a friend yesterday who recently lost his wife, and I got to tell you, I don't know how people survive without a church community, especially in today's society where the world just moves so fast. It's so fast paced with the internet and just the busyness of life. We all feeling like we have to keep up with the Joneses at times, or keep up with make sure our kids are just as brilliant or just as involved as some other person's. It's just all so crazy. Life just gets out of whack sometimes. And then these things happen that help you to just re-examine your own life. And I had an opportunity to do that yesterday and the prior week after attending my friend's memorial, Lisa Edwards. And it was just a very touching memorial. She was such a godly person and such a person that was just very much so involved in our church and outreaches for our church into the community. I always hate using that term community because it sounds like communist, but that's what the church is called to do, right? And not big government, but the church is. And Lisa Edwards embodied, and she was a conservative, but she embodied taking on taking on issues in the community, but using the church to do it and using her God-given talent to do it and the way that she should. She was a sponsor of my local radio show as well. Here's what I want to get into. I started thinking about cultural Marxism, and I started thinking about our children and the youth of today's, America's youth. And I was just really thinking about cultural Marxism and how they've just been bombarded with all of these issues, the pronouns, am I this, am I that, just no objective truth. I mean, all objective truth is just totally being abolished. Just the overwhelming presence of social media in their life, the disconnection with parents, the disconnection with church and religion and morality. And I was like, man, you know what? I need to talk about this. I really started. I want to be a solutions-based podcast. I don't want to just complain, although I do believe at times that's effective because I don't know what God has motivated you guys to do in the listening audience, to get you motivated to hear what I have to say, maybe inspired by what I have to say. And then you go out and do whatever it is God has called you to do to better the culture, to fight for Christ, to fight for our culture, to fight for the Constitution, whatever it may be. I hope that when you tune in here, you're inspired to do just that. But there's always a macro issue. There's always the macro issue, which I believe is God, and then there's everything else that happens besides that. And I kind of want to get into that today. So I started thinking about cultural Marxism and the cure to it, the antidote to it. And it's really simple. It's really simple. And sadly, and I think increasingly, the conservative movement, and even I would argue the people of faith, have gotten scared to say it or uncomfortable with saying it, perhaps because of the lifestyles that we're living. And which listen, I'm not here to judge you today on your lifestyles. I screw up all the time, but there is a solution. There is an answer, and that is to go back to church, to find God. For me, I'm a Christian. I believe that's Jesus Christ. So there is an answer to that. And I want to talk about that today, because if you want to end cultural Marxism, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Take your kids to church. take your kids back to church. I was reading through a couple of articles, one left from a very left-wing site, The Guardian, but they were, it was a good article, but also one from The Federalist. So I'm going to intertwine the two. And what I'm going to try to convince you to do is to go back to church. And listen, I'm preaching to myself. Sometimes I get so busy with life, so wrapped up with my business, with radio and everything else that I'll put church on the back burner sometimes. Like, okay, well, I can listen online while I'm out doing my thing, and no, it's not the same. So I'm trying to make a concerted effort to make sure that I'm back inside of a church building, my home church building, every Saturday, every Sunday. I'm sorry, it won't always happen, but for the most part, it would. And I've been a weekly attendee for decades, and then all of a sudden, it stopped, and not because of COVID. To be frank, our church didn't shut down. I think maybe a week or two, and we were like, "Hey, screw this!" Thank God we had pastors that had the wherewithal and the courage to say we're not shutting down. Before I go on and before I get into this, but I want you to share this podcast seriously. If you're serious about ending cultural Marxism, I want you to go to church, and I want you to take your kids to church. And I don't want you to be afraid of your kids. I know that sounds crazy, but some of you need to hear this. I don't want you to be afraid of your kids anymore. I want you to love your kids enough to give them a dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies, a world that wants to take advantage of them. I want you to take them back to church. I really do. And so we'll get into this. But first, I want to encourage you to please subscribe to my podcast wherever podcasts are found: Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Also, The Carl Jackson Show, SalemPodcastNetwork.com. Please, when you go on to YouTube and Rumble, I need you to like, subscribe, rate them, review them, help us spread the news on YouTube and Rumble. We would really appreciate that. Also, I want to talk to you about my sponsors, 4patriots.com. A food shortage could be coming even in the U.S. Experts wrote this as recently as July. There's drought, inflation, and even now policies that are pushing America's food supply near the brink. And that's why survival food is so important, and more than ever. Create your stockpile of the best-selling 4 Patriots survival food kits. That's the number 4 Patriots. It's not ordinary food, okay? We're talking about a good 25 years of super survival food, handpicked in a family-owned facility right here in the USA. 200 American jobs have been created. The kits are compact, they're sturdy, they're water resistant, and they stack very easily. They have different delicious breakfast meals, lunches, dinners that are ready in less than 20 minutes. All you have to do is add boiling water, simmer, and serve. Right now, you can go to 4Patriots. That's the number 4Patriots.com. Use the promo code Carl for 10% off of your first purchase, all right? Including this 3-month survival kit. You'll get a year-long guarantee plus free shipping on orders that are over $97. They're called 4 Patriots, the number 4 Patriots, because a portion of every sale is donated to charities who support our veterans and their families. Go to 4patriots.com and use the promo code Carl. That's the number 4patriots.com. Use the promo code Carl to get the 10% off of your first purchase. That's 4patriots.com. Promo code Carl. Start building your stockpile today. And also mypillow.com. Have you ever picked up a set of towels in the store, whether it's Target, Walmart, or whatever, and they feel all nice and soft in the store, and you get home and they just don't dry like they should? Well, MyPillow has come up with their own towels that actually do dry, that actually work. Imagine that. That's why MyPillow has developed the MyPillow towels. Their 6-piece towel set includes 2 bath towels, 2 hand towels, 2 washcloths. They come in a variety of colors, and right now you can receive a 6-piece set for only $39.98 when you use the promo code Carl. Just go to mypillow.com right now. Click on the radio listener special. That's mypillow.com. Click on the radio listener special, or give them a call, 800-858-0263. Use the promo code Carl. All of these products come with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee, so you can't beat that with a bet. All right. Now, getting back to the issue at hand, are you serious about ending cultural Marxism? Then take your kids to school. I want to first read and take from this article that I found at The Guardian. Now, The Guardian is a far left-wing rag, all right? Just so that you understand that. First, let me just bring you some of the latest news that hit over the weekend. I forgot to talk about this. This is very important, and I won't stay long on this issue, but some things that you should be aware of. One, we know this is going to continue to happen because the left is pushing Joe Biden out. They want to get him out. They want to get him to say, okay, I cry uncle. I will not run in 2024. That's what we see happening right now. That is the overwhelming consensus that I do certainly believe. All right, so the latest is that there has been yet another set of classified documents that were found in Joe Biden's house in Delaware. But this time, some of the papers that were found, or some of the documents that were found, and keep in mind, documents don't mean a single paper or something like that. They could be 500 pages. One document could be 500 pages. All right, just to be clear on that. So we're not sure exactly what those documents can contain, but there were more classified documents found at his house again over the weekend. All right, so this is absolutely insane. Now, here's what's damaging. This is where it gets straight criminal now. And this is where the Biden administration has to be very concerned. And they approved the search by the DOJ or FBI or whomever came onto their premises, but their attorneys were there yet again. And so here's the concern. Now there's been classified documents found while Biden was in the Senate. Okay, now that's very different, right? So first off, he wasn't lawfully allowed to have classified documents as vice president, but you could understand how he would get his hands on some since he was the vice president of the United States, right? He didn't have the power to classify or declassify or declassify classified documents while he was vice president, yet he had classified documents, involving Ukraine, Iran, the United Kingdom. You guys know the story. Lots of ties to China. You guys know the story. Well, now even more documents have been found, but while he was a senator. How did he get his hands on this information while he was a senator? Classified documents while he was a senator. Guys, this is straight up criminal, and they know it. The left knows it. They want to get his behind out. He's lost all moral authority. He can't go after Trump. It's going to be hard to continue to pretend as if this guy is all high and mighty and virtuous. Not to mention his dementia is getting even worse. So this is going to be really hard. But that's the latest news on that. Even more documents found. This time he stole them, quote, in my opinion, as a senator. Also, the March for Life yields thousands of participants as the White House discusses codifying Roe v. Wade. Lord willing, that won't go in anywhere. But Tony Dungy was a speaker, or the keynote speaker, I believe, at the 50th March for Life. And the people were asked, many of the people there attending, the pro-lifers attending, why are you attending now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned? And the overwhelming response is, we still got a ways to go. There's still unborn babies that are being slaughtered under the guise of choice. And this is still not a good thing. So we still have a ways to go. So good for them. Young people are turning out. We're seeing more pro-life young people. Praise God for that. That's an absolutely good thing. Then there was this shooting that occurred in Monterey Park where, the left is trying to say it was, what are they saying? Saying it was racially motivated. When the guy, some people were out celebrating the Chinese Lunar Year. And sadly, this 72-year-old shooter, and this murderer, I shouldn't say shooter, I'm a shooter, but this murderer comes in and assassinates 10 people, 5 men, 5 women, injures 10 others, some more severe than others, before eventually taking his own life. Antifa put up some protests in Atlanta. A state trooper apparently shot someone that was being non-compliant. Antifa went buck wild. Riots ensued, and many people were arrested, including the son, I believe, of a Democratic congresswoman. So interesting news there. Okay, now let me get to it. Those are just some of the headlines for the day. Now, let me get to this. All right. So The Guardian, losing their religion while U.S. churches are on the decline. The article reads, and here's the summary. Churches are closing at rapid numbers in the U.S., researchers say, as congregations dwindle across the country and a younger generation of Americans abandon Christianity altogether, even as faith continues to dominate American politics. All right, that's very important. Faith continues to dominate American politics, yet you have people leaving the faith in droves. As the U.S. adjusts to an increasingly non-religious population, thousands of churches are closing each year in the country, a figure that experts believe may have accelerated since the COVID-19 pandemic, and I say lockdowns. Some pastors are struggling on whether or not to sell their churches because their congregations are dwindling down. This has opened the door for a booming real estate market, ironically, with older churches. Many still being used, some being sold to other churches, but many still being used for pastors that even sell are like, hey, listen, we want our churches used for something good. So they use them for different nonprofits or missionary type, some stuff that I might not agree with. But for the most part, the pastors are trying to make sure that some good come out of the buildings if they do have to sell them. But man, the attendance is on the decline big time. Let me read you some stats. All right. This is according to Lifeway Research. About 4,500 Protestant churches closed in 2019. All right. Listen to that. 4,500 Protestant churches closed in 2019. That's the last year that data is available. 3,000 or only 3,000 new churches open. This according to Lifeway Research. So in 2019, now remember, this is pre-pandemic. So in 2019, 4,500 churches closed, only 3,000 open. That leaves us with a deficit of 1,500 Protestant churches that just went bye-bye across the country. And this was before the pandemic. So this is the first time the number of churches, according to Lifeway Research, the first time that the number of churches in the U.S. hadn't grown. All right. With the pandemic speeding up the process and making it even more broader. Basically, the globalists got their way with the lockdowns. The globalists got their way. What's the antidote to communism? Seriously, stop and think about it. What is the antidote to communism, to this godless ideology? Well, the answer is God. The answer is church. That's the antidote. Christianity, in my opinion, Judeo-Christian values. If you're an American, we shouldn't be ashamed of these things. It's amazing to me how people want to run away from faith, how people want to run away from our founding principles, and they have no rock to stand on when they do that. Morality is objective without God, or subjective. I'm sorry, subjective without God. Who's to say, if you're not Richard Ramirez, if you're not Jeffrey Dahmer, if you're not one of these, any one of these, this guy in Moscow, Idaho, allegedly, the alleged murder there, who's to say that they're not moral if God doesn't exist? You? How do you arbitrarily hold that moral authority? You don't. And that's why we need a higher power to judge us. There's going to be judgment. This is very, very important. This is very important for children too. All right. So here's what this guy, Scott McConnell, he's the executive director of Lifeway Research, says, and I quote, "The closures, even for a temporary period of time, impacted a lot of churches. People breaking that habit of attending church means a lot of churches had to work hard to get people back to attending again." What do you think Gavin Newsom in California was trying to do? What do you think leftists were trying to do? What do you think the World Economic Forum was trying to do? And suggesting that people stay out of churches, people don't worship. What do you think they were trying to do? They were trying to break our habits, because what they want to do is replace God in society. They want government to be your moral authority or the final authority in society. Never mind that these people running government or these people running World Economic Forum and all of these places don't have a moral leg to stand on. It doesn't matter. They're powerful. They're elites. They've got more money than you. So they must be smarter than you. That's what they believe. They believe that they're God. You heard people say this about Klaus Schwab. The guy believes he's God. This guy, Scott McConnell, the executive director of Lifeway Church, says in the last 3 years, all signs are pointing to a continued pace of closures, probably similar to 2019, possibly even higher, as there's been a really rapid rise in American individuals who say they're not religious. They're not religious at all. So church attendance is only 85% now of pre-pandemic levels. Actually, that's better than I thought it would be, frankly. The University of Chicago said that in the spring of 2022, 67% of Americans reported attending church at least once a year, compared with 75% before the pandemic. And this is what the left wants to do. If they can move God out of the culture, if they can get you to stop believing in God, if they can get you to break your habits of attending church, they know the vacuum will be filled by leftists. left-wing ideology. They understand that. Margaret Sanger understood that. They really did. So sadly, it says here, but what COVID-19 may have accelerated the decline. While COVID-19 may have accelerated the decline, there is a broader long-running trend of people that were already moving away from a religion. In 2017, Lifeway Research surveyed young adults ages 18 to 22 who attended church regularly for at least a year. During high school, the firm found that 7 out of 10 had stopped attending church regularly. 7 out of 10, 70% had stopped attending church regularly. This is a very important sentence that I'm going to read. It says here, the younger generation doesn't feel like they're being accepted in a church environment, or some of their choices aren't being accepted. I blame the church for this. See, the church exists to challenge you. The church exists. It's a place you go to find truth. It's a place where you go to find objective truth. And people need to be challenged. See, children aren't being challenged anymore in their thinking. When they go to college, and sadly now, many of our students are being indoctrinated. They're not being taught how to think. They're being taught what to think. You've heard that cliche, but it's so true today. But when you go to church, you're being taught how to worship. You're being taught how to think. You're not being taught what to think. We recognize when you go to church that you're an individual, and that God can use you in whatever way he sees fit, but his word is based on objective truth. And you have to navigate. That. Here's what Scott McConnell says. There are logistical issues as well concerned with people that are leaving the church. Young people, sometimes they're leaving for college, so they don't attend church where they go. Sometimes it's a new job for younger people. But here's the top answer for leaving church. One of the top answers was church members seem to be judgmental or hypocritical. Now, this is very important. And I want to address this because a lot of people don't know how to address this or come back with this. I used to hear this all the time. I used to say this as an excuse not to go to church, right? And perhaps many of you did. But yeah, the church is judgmental. The church is hypocritical. What do you think they're doing? These people are doing when they say the church is being judgmental. They're judging. Everyone is judgmental. Everyone is judgmental. The question is there truth there or is there not? Now, hypocrites. I don't believe churchgoers are hypocrites. Now, Carl, how can you say that? People go to church all the time and they screw. Hey, I screw up and I mess up, but I realize that I'm a sinner, only saved by grace. And I want to do better as I get closer to God. And my behavior as I get closer to God improves. And that's what church is. That's what church is for. We're not the hypocrites. We're the ones that realize that we need a savior, that we realize that we need God, that we realize we need help. So it isn't hypocritical at all. We're a work in progress. The church is a hospital, metaphorically speaking, a spiritual hospital, metaphorically speaking. All right. But that's the top answer. So the younger generation doesn't feel like, again, like they're being accepted in a church environment, or some of their choices aren't being accepted by those that are at church. These are people that want to define who God is for themselves. They want to create their own God, and you simply can't do that. These will be the first people to claim, oh, there's a separation of church and state as well. The ones that say, don't be hypocritical, don't be judgmental. Here's a study from Pew found that the number of Americans who identified as Christians was 64% in 2020, with 30% of the U.S. population being classed as religiously unaffiliated. We'll talk about that. These people are called nuns. They break it down in the next column that I'll be getting to shortly. About 6% of Americans identify with Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism. All right. So 64% in 2020 identified as Christian, 30% being classified as non-religious or nuns. N-O-N-E-S, not N-U-N-S, and about 6% Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism. All right, he says here, Pew does, and I quote, since the 1990s, large numbers of Americans have left Christianity, to join the growing ranks of U.S. adults who describe their religious ideology as atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular. And I would say these are people that just haven't been challenged much in their thinking. I really do believe that. I mean, it was really easy to say that I was atheist or agnostic when I was living a crazy lifestyle, because I didn't want people to judge me. So it was really easy. All right. But sadly, this accelerating trend of people dropping out of religion or leaving church, it is impacting the culture. It is impacting the U.S. religious landscape. It's impacting our political landscape as well. In 1972, trip off of these stats. In 1972, 92% of Americans identified or said they were Christian. Identified as or said they were Christian. We're nowhere near that today. Right now, we got about 64% saying that as of 2020. The Pew reported by 27, that number will drop to below 50%. So they predict that within, 40 years, close to 40 years, approximately 40 years, that the number of people that identify as Christian will drop to fewer than 50%. And I think we can change that. Hopefully that isn't right, but I think we can change that, and we need to change that. Because you've got, once you have 50% of people that aren't even willing to identify as Christian or people of faith, then I think the United States is completely gone. I don't think there's any hope for it coming back at that point. Steve Bullivant, he's the author of Nonverts, The Making of Ex-Christian America, and professor of theology and sociology of religion at St. Mary's University. He said this in the Christian world. There had been a generational change. She said, while grandparents might have been regular churchgoers, their children would say they believe in God, all right, but not go to church regularly. By the time millennials came around, they had little experience or relationship with church going or religion at all. And you got a lot of people out there that say, hey, I'm not religious. I don't need to be in a church building. Well, that doesn't contort with the Bible. Because the Bible teaches to not forsake the fellowship of your people or of his people, fellow believers. All right. So that doesn't even contort with the Bible, but you got a lot of people that want to sound smart, that want to excuse not going to church. And guys, and I've used it all. Let me tell you something. I've been a sinner amongst sinners. I've used every excuse in the book. I've used every excuse in the book. And sometimes people say that because maybe they were bound in a cult. I used to be bound in a cult, to be frank with you. And I know people that have, and so sometimes there's this fear of going back to a religious, organized religion and being taken advantage of or being duped again. But once you read the Bible, you start understanding who Christ is, the person of Christ, and your life changes, right? It's pretty amazing. And then you want to go to church. And then once you get to know Christ better, you can navigate. You know when you're dealing with someone who isn't right or not. You know most of the times when you're dealing with a cult or not. All right. So, but the pandemic is the other thing, obviously, that has destroyed religion in America, or church attendance. That's obvious. In the Catholic Church in particular, they said the sexual abuse scandal drove some Catholics away from the church, or may have. Here's the post-pandemic excuse. A lot of people, according to this guy Bullivant, who were weekly attached, meaning not weekly as in every week, but they weren't strong believers in the first place, to suddenly have months of not going. They're then thinking, well, we don't really need to go, or we found something else to do, or thinking it was hard enough dragging the kids along then. We really ought to start going again next week. So they keep putting it off, and it just doesn't happen. But sadly, the United States have been slowly moving away from religion, like places like Canada, Britain, France, New Zealand, and other places like that. It's on the rise here. Now, the guy made an interesting point. He says, what happens in America that I think dampens down the rise of the nuns, the non-religious, is the Cold War. Because in America, unlike in Britain, there's a very explicit kind of Christian America versus godless communism framing, like they have in parts of Europe. All right. And to be non-religious is to be un-American. And that's where we were during the Cold War and prior to the Cold War. But millennials who, when you talk about the Cold War, it's a vague memory, if that. Many of them may not even have heard the term Cold War. Man, that's just the truth, and it's sad. However, places like Texas, a guy by the name of John Mazuka said there were fewer churches for sale than any other point in the last 15 years. So in places like Texas, religion and churches seem to be thriving. And they say this is in part because places like Texas didn't close down, or at least not for a long period of time. So basically the window was this. 3 to 12 months. So if your church shut down during the pandemic for 3 months, chances are you took a big hit and your church might not be coming back. And you may see a for sale sign up at your church pretty soon. If your church was closed for a year, I'm sorry. If it was 3 months, people tend to come back, or people tend to come back. But if it was, 12 months, now I can tell you for our church, I think we shut down for a week or two. It wasn't long, but people were so terrified, many, based upon everything they were hearing in mainstream media from, the jabs when it first happened. Obviously, the jabs weren't an issue right then, but mask wearing and all this kind of stuff. And people were just scared. People didn't know what to expect. And initially, you expect that. But thank God our church stayed open. We not only did we keep the doors open, obviously, people can tune in online. And our senior pastor would constantly ask people to come back to regular service and attend. I mean, if they had to spread them out, the ushers would work to do that, so on, et cetera. But we didn't shut our doors. I mean, for the first week, like I said, or two, maybe 2 Sundays. I don't even think it was that, but maybe 2 Sundays we did. And then it was back to church. And that was a good thing. And this is the case with Texas. And I suspect this is the case with Florida, although I don't hear it in there. I hope it's the case anyway. But here's another issue, aging out. He says here, this guy, Mazuka, I'll just call him Muzyka. He says a church will go through a life cycle. At some point, he says, maybe the congregation ages out, or maybe they stop reaching young families. If the church ages and doesn't reach young people, or the demographics change and they don't figure out how to reach the new demographic, that church ends up closing. So you got to reach the new demographic. He says, yes, there's financial pressures that will close a church, but oftentimes it's more that they didn't figure out how to change when the community changed, or they didn't have enough young people to continue the congregation for the next generation. Now, that was a piece of the left-wing column from The Guardian. Now I'm going to take you to the right. And I'm going to go through this quickly because it's not as long, but I wanted to make sure that you got the background. Again, according to The Guardian, a lot of churches or a lot of people are losing their religion. U.S. churches are on decline. The churches aren't doing what feels good to the youth. A lot of churches shut down simply because of the lockdowns, and they were never able to recover. And then I read this column from the Federalist. If your kids are unhappy, take them to church. And I think actually this is the antidote for everything the Guardian was talking about. This is the conservative movement. And again, I consider myself a constitutional restorationist, but honestly, sometimes for the sake of ease, I know a lot of people still call themselves conservative. So to make this easy, I'll just say conservatives. But if you really want to end communism, if you really want this, if you really want to push against what the left is doing with the trans community, with CRT, DEI, all of this stuff that's this cultural Marxism, there's only one antidote. There's only one antidote, and that's God. And in my opinion, it's Christianity. What are you going to push back on? Your feelings, or with your feelings? Oh, I feel this is wrong. I think this is wrong, or this is common sense. Well, to a person who's trans, that's common sense. To a person that's racist, and I believe those that proponents of CRT are racist, they're going to feel like that's immoral. You see, they found their religion, and so if you abandon faith, the real objective truth, you have no leg to stand on. And sadly, I believe this is what's missing in the conservative movement. So many times we try to shun those that are just so pro-life. Oh man, they were at the March for Life. Oh, they're just extreme. Are they? Was your mother extreme when she gave birth to you? I mean, are they really extreme because they like babies? And I fear we act this way because we're so concerned about what the left thinks about us. The problem is, look at what the left has done to the country. They've destroyed it, not just financially, but racially. I mean, as far as sexual orientation is concerned, as far as, I shouldn't say sexual orientation, but biological sex is concerned, they've destroyed it. So why are we concerned about what the left thinks? Here's a summary from the Federalist. It seems like every time I turn around, an editor assigns me a story related to the mental. This written by Mary Rose Colsack. Every time I turn around, an editor assigns me a story related to the mental health crisis of our children. Most of the health experts I speak to correlate COVID lockdowns and our children's fragile state. Closing schools played a major role in this phenomenon. But what if other crucial factors are being overlooked, she asks. All right, so COVID lockdowns, there's no doubt, played a role in the rising mental anguish, depression, anxiety, suicide rates that we've seen from our teens and our children. But what if it's something else, she asks? And I think it is. And this goes back to God. Again, if you want to end cultural Marxism, take your kids to church. Take your kids to church. She says another story, seemingly unrelated to the mental health crisis, is making the rounds in the corporate press. Church attendance is on a rapid decline. The nuns survey, again, non-religious people, respondents who say they have no religious affiliation, they are the fastest growing group in the United States every year. So we now have a generation of adults, right? They grew up not attending worship services at all, and they're raising their children in the exact same way. So this is how the Marxists, this is how the communists take over. So now the nuns say they prefer a parenting style. They prefer their own parenting style. They say we're fine without church and worship and religious instructions and institutions. Thank you very much. That's the parenting style that they want. They want to be able to tell their parents what's best. And a lot of weak parents coddle to this. But here's the problem. They're not fine. Their children are not coping and managing day-to-day stresses in the same way that you and I could when we did have God. Any inconvenience throws them off, throws them into a tizzy. They are fragile. And they are fragile because they don't have God. They are fragile because they're looking at their phones for identity. Everybody telling them who they are and what they're supposed to be and what pronoun they're supposed to pick. And if they don't pick this pronoun, they're not a good person and this and blah, 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 blah. Rather than God saying, you know what, I know you. I knew you before you were born. I created you. This is the purpose that I have planned for your life. Boom, done. You don't have to worry about all the outside noises. All you have to do is obey me, obey the law, and do what I called you to do. You'll be good. That's how you build a strong person. That's how you build a strong person. She says here, the nuns will tell you, again, the non-religious will tell you that because we'll tell you it is because we need to be better, or the churches need to better embrace children's differences and preferences like their pronouns. No, you go to church for objective truth. Why are we listening to people whose brains don't even form fully until they're 25? Seriously. We've almost gone crazy with empowering kids. Actually, we have gone crazy. While empowering them with positive affirmations, that's what they want. That's what this new generation wants. If they're going to go to church, this is what they want. They want personal acceptance through self-esteem workshops. And then we make this mistake of cluttering their calendars with sports, theater, STEM stuff, science projects, you name it, dance, whatever we have to do to keep them busy. And then if that's not enough, we hope that social media or their phones will self-medicate them, maybe throw them on a video game. We hope that'll self-medicate them. And it doesn't work. Parents will do everything else but take their kids to church. They will do everything for their kids except take them to church. Why is that? When church is the place that you go to build better people. Why do we do that? Why aren't parents taking their children to weekly worship? Is it because they're lazy? Is it because they're tired? Is it because they're afraid of what people might think of them? Isn't it amazing how the left is never concerned what you think of them, but we're concerned with what the left thinks of us. Isn't that amazing? Parents are cowards today. They really are. They say their children and teens don't want to attend worship, many of them. So that's why they don't go. Their kids don't want to. So that's plenty of reason for them not to go. Parents, grow up and be parents, man. I'm sorry. When you're parents, you're a benevolent dictator of sorts. Be parents. That's what you're called to be. You're not called to be friends. Maybe when you get older, your child graduates and they have their own life and their own family, then you can friend up all you want. But when they're young, you're called to be parents. You're called to be protectors of these people. You're called to be providers of these people. For other important decisions, It says here, this democratic approach to family decision making only seems to apply to church attendance. However, for other important decisions like wearing a seatbelt or vaccinations, parents balk at giving their children their voting privileges. So when it comes to the things that really don't matter, seatbelts. I know seatbelts matter. I get it, but chances are of you getting in a car accident are pretty slim to none for the most part. Vaccinations. We can have an argument on that, but your child's spiritual well-being, what's going to build your child's character. Parents are lazy when it comes to that. It says here, a child's vote carries more weight when it aligns with a parent's desire to stay home in pajamas on a Sunday morning. So sometimes parents, if you want to create better children, you got to be better people and you got to go to church yourself. Here are the benefits of going to church. And this is a study. In 2018 study, Harvard's T.H. Chan School of Public Health found some benefits to children and adolescents who attend weekly worship. This is very important. Children and teens who attend worship grow up to be young adults with higher rates of happiness and life satisfaction. Right, because they're not worried yet. It's not to say that they don't struggle or get caught up with the trends and the whims of society. Of course that happens. We're all human, right? All of our kids are human. But eventually they come back to objective truth. They come back to what's important. Children that go to church they were less likely to suffer from anxiety and depression because they have an outreach. They have an outreach of like-minded people. When I sat there and I attended my friend's memorial and then went out to eat with them the other day, I just sat there and I thought, man, I don't know what I would do if I were in his shoes. I don't know what I would do without a church community, without somebody to come around you. Yeah, you have family, but guess what? Family gets busy. Family may not live in the same state, may not live in the same area. Sometimes friends are closer than a brother, the Bible tells us. And sometimes a person just needs to speak and talk and get this stuff out. They can do that in the church community. He has that, even though this is very difficult. But he has that. We all need that. I need that. And sometimes I shy away from it. I'm not going to lie to you. But I mean, just it's been coming into focus of how much I need church community, how much I need people. And so do you, and especially our children. Our kids that go to church are also less likely to use illicit drugs, less likely to engage in early sex or sexual promiscuity, to contract STDs. Here's another thing, the benefits of church for your young children. They're more likely to volunteer. They're more likely to embrace volunteering and report it feeling a sense of mission and a sense of purpose than their non-church attending counterparts. All right. So that's very important too. Parents, think about this. When you get older, who's going to take care of you? You want to create a mission-minded, a servant-minded child, a child that has compassion, a child that believes there's a God above that is judging their behavior. Man, so why are we so surprised when anxiety and depression amongst teens is so high? When every day their brains are being bombarded with everything from pronouns to, you can be a different sex if you choose, in all this racial animus. You're an oppressor versus a non-oppressor. And then we try to use, you think bumper sticker slogans are going to work. You are perfect. You are awesome. That stuff isn't going to work. It isn't going to work. It isn't going to work. The answer is Christ. The answer is taking our kids back to church. The answer is helping our kids find their true identity, what they were called for, what they were born for, what their real purpose is. I didn't intend to be real preachy, but this just hit me. This just hit me. And here's what families find at church. What could families find at church that they won't find anywhere else? Truth. You go to church, you find truth. It's not because you want to be judgmental. It's not because you want to be hypocritical. But the truth is we all judge. We all make judgment calls. We make judgment calls on what to wear. We make judgment calls on what to eat. We make judgment calls on what other people are wearing. We make judgment calls with people cut us off in the road and we make judgment calls all the time. But it's only when it comes down to church that we complain about it, because we know then there's a mirror that's looking at our own soul. Like, we don't want that. We don't want that. We just want to look good. The truth is, Jesus came for sinners. None of us are perfect. He came for sinners. Here's what this author said, because I like to, she just put it so perfectly. She said, for your kids, here's what your kids needs to know. You're not perfect. You know that mean thing that you did to your classmate in the cafeteria, that was a sin. And that nasty thought you had about that person, that was a sin. And that snide comment you made to your mom when you were hangry, that was a sin. But the good news is you've come to the right place. Jesus came for sinners. As a matter of fact, the church is filled with them. That's what I told you. Each week, the church is a hospital. It's a spiritual hospital. That's all it is. If you consider that, you'll get over that hypocrite argument. It's a spiritual hospital. It's people that realize they're sick. All right, spiritually sick. Each week they come to hear the message that even though we are sinful human beings, Jesus died for those sins. When we confess those nasty thoughts and horrible things that we did, we can receive forgiveness, a clean slate. We need a higher authority. Your children need to have a higher authority than their peers. They need to have a higher authority than TikTok and Twitter and Instagram and you name it, whatever else is out there that they're on. They need a higher authority than that. They need some place where they can get truth. We're going to mess up. But the good news is we can mess up and we can go back to church and we can be forgiven. And then we can become better as God convicts us as we grow closer to God. That's what we need. Parents, she says, we put our children at a disadvantage when we do not give them the very thing they need for their mental and spiritual health. And that's church attendance. So kind of not what you were probably expecting on a Monday. But guys, I want to save the culture. And when you come here, I'm gonna give you truth. I'm gonna give you truth, and I am so far from perfect. It's not even funny, but I know truth, and I know where to aim, and that's what I hope that I gave you today. I hopefully you know where to aim. Take your kids to church. You want to end cultural Marxism. You want to see an end to all of this crap that we're seeing destroying our nation, the racial tension, the trans issue, the Antifas, the BLMs, all this racism, this renewed racism. Take your kids to church. Don't let them get caught up in this. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Please support my sponsors, mypillow.com. Take advantage of that towel deal, 6-piece towel set for only $39.98. Go to mypillow.com, click on the radio listener square, enter my name, Carl. Give them a call, 800-858-0263, American Jobs and American Manufacturing. Also, 4Patriots, our new sponsor. Glad they're on board. The number 4patriots.com. Right now, if you go to 4patriots.com, use the promo code Carl, you'll get 10% off of your first purchase, including a 3-month survival kit. You'll get a year-long guarantee plus free shipping on orders that are over $97. They're called 4Patriots because a portion of every sale is donated to charities that help support veterans and their families. So go to 4Patriots.com, use the promo code Carl to get 10% off. Remember, we're talking about food that's good for 25 years. I always recommend that you keep some of the things around, maybe a month's supply or more of things that you would eat typically, maybe some canned goods, crackers, whatever that you can eat or store around. So your stomach doesn't feel bad, but if the crap hits the fan, you definitely want to make sure that you have these guys. They're buckets of stuff around, easily stackable, and you're good. You're good, no matter what happens. Floods hurt you, you're good. All right, so go to 4patriots.com. Use the promo code Carl. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in. And until next time, don't go where you're doing good. God bless you.